right into it. So today we are in chapter 14, and I want you guys to really pay attention to the chapters that we're on because they will be on the final. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and show you. For the final exam, you will be tested this Thursday on chapters 4, 5, 11, 13, and 14. So it won't be all the chapters that we've gone over. Like last Friday, we did 8 and 12. And then on Thursday, there's a chapter, but those won't be on the test, obviously. But for chapters 4 and 5, 11, 13, and 14, 4 and 5 were from last week, and 11, 13, and 14 are from this week. So please make sure you pay attention to that. It is open book, obviously, but you want to try and make sure you read in advance. All right. So in chapter 14, we're going to talk a little bit more about professionalism, and then we're going to also talk about something I introduced a few days ago. It's called multi-generational and multicultural, basically diversity in the workplace. I know diversity is such a bad word nowadays, but unfortunately we can't get around it because we are different. Imagine that. We're not all the same. How boring would that be? And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to talk about it in a way that it is not talked about in the news. So let's start with professionalism. What is that? We hear that terminology a lot, right? People will say, you need to be professional. You need to be professional. What does that mean? Professionalism is a soft skill. So we know what soft skill is, right? But what is it exactly? It's a soft skill that also includes your ability to have good judgment, to your character, who you are, your behavior. I hate to say it, but it's kind of those skills that you're supposed to learn at home. But it is what you grow up with, something that you add to the skill set that you learn at work, because every job has their own set of norms, right? What a job expects you to be and how to behave. Let's say at a bank can be very different from how you may behave at an auto mechanic shop, when there's no customers, who knows, right? But professionalism has to do with judgment and character. It also includes a lot about how you self-manage. Now, that could be a new term, because self-management, what does that mean exactly? Well, it has to do with your ability to have self-control. I know you're like, who doesn't have self-control? Well, you'd be surprised. It's interesting how we go from being a kid, like you're in high school, maybe your parents are still telling you to get up, maybe you have an alarm, maybe you have that control to get up. But then the moment you turn 18, what does everyone say? You're an adult now. You should know how to take care of yourself. You should know, right? Ideally, we learn those skills along the way, because the moment you start a job, the moment you go into the workforce, people just expect you to have these skill sets. And one of them is self-management. For example, do you know to show up on time? I know that seems like a really simple task, but punctuality, are you dependable? Can people depend on you to be where you're supposed to be and be where, how do what you're supposed to do? Go ahead, Ann.
I can assure you, punctuality is not a common skill.
I
Especially
know.
when you need people to show up on time.
I know it's horrible, but and I don't know where I got this from, but like maybe the military, but being on time to me is it's crucial, right? You see, some of you may have noticed, like I start right at 9:59. That's embedded in my personality. Part of it comes from the military. Go ahead, Joshua. Joshua, you can go ahead.
Yeah, that's why yesterday I used the punctuate attendance, attitude, and appearance. Those are the three most important character like personality traits of it, work ethic.
It really is. And, obviously some jobs, like emergency type jobs, you got to be on time. Like, can you imagine a doctor or a nurse or ambulance driver running late, not being on time for work, a police officer not being on time for work? Like, you can't be late, my friend, okay? But, being on time is so incredibly important. Being dependable, people rely on you to do your part so they can do their part. And oftentimes we don't think of how our work affects someone else, but that's what being dependable is all about. Having good time management. Maybe you have 2, 3 different projects that you're working on, and having good time management is critical. Now, some of this requires you to have to learn yourself over time. Like, nobody knows who they are as a worker until you start working. Who you are as a student, who you are as a person can be very different from who you are as an employer or an employee. You don't really know that till you start working. So don't like beat yourself up about like, oh, I'm supposed to just be this person. No, these are things that you have to learn to be, understanding why these things are critical. But for me, the most important one is emotional regulation. Has anyone ever heard that term before? Emotional regulation? Yeah, so we're going to touch a bit on that because, and Joshua, I'll come back to you when we get there, because if you don't know how to self-regulate, and a lot of times people think it's about people outward, but it's about people. It's about you. It's not about you telling someone else about themselves. Is about you understanding how you react to the environment around you. So professionalism with self-management, we talked about punctuality, we talked about dependability, we talked about good time management. But what is this idea about emotional regulation? Go ahead, Josh.
I actually have a wife that has emotional regulation problems. She's mentally has a mental illness that causes her unable to control it, bipolar disorder, ADHD. So I know how important it is to have emotional regulation, like control that, because without it, you'll be lashing out. You'll be thinking everything else is not your fault. You'll be unable to function properly without emotionally being able to scale it and control it.
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter is, on the spectrum, and she, if I always have to constantly teach her about emotional regulation because, she's turning 12 and she's having all these different changes, and, she has these huge mood swings, and I'm having to find myself giving her different techniques on self-regulation. So it's a big issue for a lot of people, even for people that don't have any type of challenge. It's a big deal. I know I was still learning my emotions, well into my adulthood. I'm like, oh, that's what triggers me. So it's not something that you just know automatically. It's something that you have to learn. So emotional regulation has to do with learning how to control your emotions. Employees lacking this skill often lose their jobs. I know, give me a thumbs up if you've ever worked with someone that doesn't know how to control their emotions. I'm sure there's going to be 1,000 thumbs in the air. And they'll swear it's other people, right? They react to every little thing. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. They react to everything. I even got a couple of oh my gods. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead, Josh. Mm-hmm.
I've had some managers like that. I mean, crew
Oh,
members are bad
yep.
enough, but you can work around them. They can get sent home early, or I mean, you have time off. You can find other employees to cover their shifts. Now, management is a really hard one to deal with. in a sense, like they have so much control over how the flow of business works in a restaurant atmosphere and also HVAC. They have, you know what I mean, without them having emotional control or, you know what I mean, regulations, it all goes haywire.
Exactly. So, you know, it's not, again, you know, and that's the hardest part, right? Because knowing how to control yourself is one thing. Having to deal with someone that doesn't know how to control themselves, can you imagine? Right? Can you imagine? That's horrible. That's even worse. Sorry about the background noise. All right. So, but we can't be responsible for other people, right? We can only be responsible for ourselves. And that's why it's so important that you understand emotional regulation. So when your external environment changes, you know how to control your environment. That is, I mean, you know how to control yourself. That is what's most important. Go ahead, Josh.
This is a major one for me. I've had to be a manager. I was looking over the assignments for today, and I've been in the position, both positions that we're going over to do in our assignment today. So this is a
Uh-huh.
very important topic for me because I feel very close to this one.
Yes. So it is because I've been talking about emotional regulation for years. Trust me, this is it. I was so glad to see it. Hold on, make sure everybody's getting in. I was so glad to see it in this course because it's not something that we typically discuss. And again, when people have challenges, how many people say, "Oh, let me control myself." Now, you may have heard the term "let me check myself." We've heard that term before, right? Let me check myself. You know, is it me? Let me, you know, figure out a way to, you know, control how I'm reacting to a situation. That is what's critical. And that is what emotional regulation is all about. Now, some of us do it better than others just because it's our personality, right? So let's talk a little bit about this this idea of multi-generational workplaces. This is one of my favorite topics. I actually teach this in organizational behavior and when I teach business classes. Has anyone ever heard the term melting pot or salad bowl as it relates to the American population? Right? It could have been an older term for some of us. And there's always this debate whether America is a melting pot or a salad bowl. Go ahead, Josh.
That made me think of Schoolhouse Rock, the melting pot of America.
Okay, we're dating ourselves. Okay. So, or do they still do Schoolhouse Rock? I don't really know.
Thank you.
Is that still a thing?
Yes,
So,
it is. That movie is
oh,
still
is
very,
it?
very
Okay,
popular.
very good. I'm glad
My
to
kids
see.
watch that still.
Oh, really? Okay. So when it comes to, I don't know, I think it's a little bit of both, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like yes, America is a salad bowl. We come in all shapes and sizes. We come from all different backgrounds. Whether you're, you know, born here or not, even if you're born here, everybody's not the same. You know, people from the South are different from people from the North. You know, people that grew up in rural environments are different from people that grew up in urban environments. Like, it's impossible for you to have, you know, one experience. Like, life is just different. How people live in Maine is different from how people live in Texas. That's just life, right? So there's going to be a difference in how you view the world, regardless. So whether you know, combine that with, you know, if you grew up in Europe versus then you move to Africa, life is going to be different. But but there are two things that remain the same regardless of who you are, where you grow up, and you know, your ethnicity. None of that matters. Do you guys know what that could be? There's two things that is it crosses all differences, and that you'll find will typically be the same no matter where you go? Go ahead, Josh.
Families and like, you know what I mean, the togetherness of the families and also friends. You know what I mean? Those are something that I've noticed that always stays the same. I was up in Florida or down in Florida. I've been up in Indiana. I've been in Michigan. I've been to South Carolina, Texas, been a lot of different states. And one thing stays the same that I've always seen is the relatives
Oh,
and the
okay.
family and friendship.
Okay, I like that take. I'm gonna give you two. The number one, age. I don't care who you are. You are going to get older. And I don't care who you are, where you come from, whatever your background is. There's not a person alive that if they grew up in 1970s like myself, whether they grew up in Germany, they grew up in America, they grew up in the South, they grew up in Alaska. We grew up in the 70s. We are 70s babies. You understand? Even if we have, different environments, what didn't change? We grew up in the 70s. So, what are some of the things that we're all going to have in common if we grew up in the 70s? What do you guys think? One thing that's going to be similar? Probably
Certain slang terms.
certain slang terms. Absolutely. What else? Probably the things we saw on television. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm not sure what happened in the 70s, but I was gonna say like hippies, but that's the 80s, really. You know what I mean? If you grew up in the
Hippies? No,
70s,
hippies. No, that's the 70s.
well, then you grew up with the hippies. You know what I mean?
I think 60s and 70s. That's right. That's right. Don't knock it till you try it.
You know what I
This
mean?
is
The
this
tree
is what we
huggers.
know. Listen, I don't care because we all have the same experience. Who was in public office during that time? What technology was out during that time? How we experienced the world is all very, very similar, right? That's why if you go and you meet a grandma is a grandma is a grandma. They're going to have these similar ideologies because they all grew up during that era. Does that make sense? Like for you 80s babies or you 90s babies or you 2000 babies, what you watch on television, what you are exposed to, who's in political office, all that is going to be the same no matter where you go. Is generational, right? The baby boomers are probably you guys as great grandparents, because some of you, your parents are probably my age, Generation X, and we'll get into these generational, let me just show you really quickly, the silent generation. We wish it was silent, but this is kind of the Joe Biden is it coming off of the Donald Trump's era. Look how old that is. You don't really think about it till you see when they were born. Look at when they were born. So a lot of times we have certain feelings about people, but when you think about when they were born and what they were dealing with, they're probably the Great Depression, and back in these days, you worked at a job for 30 years. I was not surprised to hear, these older people in Congress, and I'm only using politics, guys, as an example because that's what's happening right now. I think we can all agree is in our face, right? Politics never was in our face like this when I grew up, but here we are. But it is prevalent, and I don't want to sound ageist, but you can imagine, you think about the people in Congress and you think about how old they are. Like I was really like taken aback at how was it Mitch McConnell, almost fainting at the podium, like go sit down, go retire, dude. Like you come, like I don't know how else to say it. Like I wouldn't want to see him on the road, on the highway, would you? Like, but if you think about when this person grew up and the things that they hold dear, it's going to be very different from someone today. Like if you went through the Great Depression, if you went through, something a high inflation period like we did in the 70s and 80s when they're complaining about interest rates now, interest rates went up to 20%. 20%. Can you imagine? It's going to affect how you see the world, right? That's why I always tell people to give people grace. You know, I give people that grew up before me a lot of grace because they went through some really tough times during this period, right? When they talk about, oh, let's get back to the good old days, they don't mean all the good old days. There's some days we don't want to go back to, but you may work with some of these people. Can you imagine those of you that were born in the 2000s working with somebody that was born in 1939? Can you understand that difference? Now, I personally, do enjoy working with people that are a little bit older because I like that dynamic. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of those, they call them those best friends where somebody's 64 and somebody's 24 and they work together. Anybody ever had that type of dynamic at work? And it can be beautiful, right? It can be beautiful, but you have to understand that that is where people are coming, right? That is where people are coming from. So I try to give people grace because how you grow up affects how you think. Think about the baby boom generation. Now, this for some of you, if your moms or your grandparents' generation, they grew up with this work ethic. I was not surprised, again, what I was about to say with Donald Trump and that group talking about everybody needs to be in the office. They don't know what remote work is. A lot of that's generational. A lot of it's, oh, we need you to go to work because, everybody goes out for their lattes at lunch and it stimulates the economy and companies get to rent out space so we can have our real estate going. And that's what they know. They don't know any different. And so when I see them and they try to pretend like, oh, it's best for the world, I'm like, yeah, it's best for the world that you lived in because that's what made sense during your time. Does that make sense, guys? So, again, I don't want to discount, the importance of having a diverse workforce, but it does start. Imagine if you're the boss and some of you will be managing people that are a lot older than you. It's important for you to understand where they come from and how they think. And this crosses all cultural barriers. And this is why I feel that age is one key thing that crosses all barriers. I don't care, race, religion, none of that is as prominent sometimes than a person's age. Does that make sense? So it's important that we understand that, their work ethic is going to be different. How they value relationships, what they consider discipline is going to be different. When I hear them say, oh, driving 2 hours one way to work was very common in their day, very common. So I get why they think that. I would just wish that, people had a little bit more grace for people that didn't grow up like you. Like, you have to understand, someone that was born in the 2000s, they're going to think very, very differently. And that's something that you're going to have top of mind, especially when you become a boss, that these generational things are different. Look at Generation X. Put a thumbs up if you was born in Generation X. Put a thumbs up if this you. I forgot to do thumbs up for my generation. Uh, uh,
I don't know what
th-
that generation is.
oh, right now it's on the screen. So Generation X is from 1960 to 1980.
Nope.
19. That's my oh my God. So clearly I'm the elder here. That's all right. I'm supposed to be. So Generation X, we grew up. Let me tell you how we grew up. This is probably your mom's generation. Put a thumbs up if this is your parents' generation then. We grew, like I said before, this is, all of you could be my children. Oh, very good. So let me tell you, we didn't grow up with technology, my people. We grew up, we were the what they call the latchkey kids. We came home, the parents had the key underneath the mat. We went in, we made our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We watched our after school special, and then we went outside to play. That was our life. That's all we knew. We came, and it was time for us to get in the house when the lights came on. That's how we grew up. You knew people on your street, on your block, at school, at church. maybe if you went to the YMCA and that was your life. That's all we knew. That was our lives. So our generation grew up that way. You know, we had a very simple life. I guess you can look at it in that sense. But then we became adults, and all of a sudden, this idea of technology came on. We were cautiously optimistic. We had to learn it because of work. We didn't make it part of our day to day life, but we made it was more of a professional thing. And so, even today, most of us people in this generation, we use technology for business. We don't use it a lot for social the way that some of the younger generation does. Let's get to it right now. Generation Y, millennials, anywhere from the 81 to the 96s, 1981 to the 96, put your hands up, put your hands in the air. Y'all a little bit more tech savvy. They started introducing tech to you guys a little bit younger. You know, I grew up on Atari, right? Now, you know, Atari and Pac-Man. You know, you guys had a little bit more than that. Go ahead, Ian.
You missed me by just a year.
Oh, so you're okay, okay. You're next. So you guys had innovation. You're a little bit more personable than we are. You know, you started to be a little bit more okay, but still millennials are really closely tied to Generation X. A lot of millennials think they're Generation X because you know they listen to the music we listen to. We're the LL Cool J's. When the rap was still, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? That type of fun-loving stuff. A lot of break dancing. That was our generation, and the millennials kind of, you know, came in on the tail end of that as well. Now, you Generation Zers, most of y'all after 1996, right? That's most of y'all, right? Is that the rest of you guys? Y'all were different. You know, y'all technology, you know, they handed it to you when you were like 2 years old. Like I handed my daughter. I don't know, Ian, your hand is still up. Um, Elijah, you want to say something?
Sorry, it wasn't showing me that it didn't show me that my hand was still up. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Elijah.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I think I caught like the last gist of it because I was born in '91, so I was like still outside, and like most of my time was still outside. And I remember being told like, "Don't come back in until you're ready. Stay
Yeah. Don't.
outside."
Most times it was when that street light came on, then we had to come inside. Like, yeah, because they wanted you to run and run and run and run and get tired, so you would come inside with all that mess. Like we didn't understand it at the time, but now it's like, oh, okay, that's what they wanted us to do, right? Like go outside and play and get tired. Like I was a climbing the tree girl. You know, we had our favorite tree, me and my best friend, and we stayed up there and watched the boys play football and kickball. That was my life. But you know, that's what they call the good old days, I guess. You know, but Generation Z, you guys are tech savvy. Like y'all, like I'm not knocking you guys because y'all making money at 12 with technology. Like I'm a hater. I'm like, man, I wish you know I had that ability to be that tech savvy. You know, I remember teaching a computer course and the kids were teaching me, but I didn't want to let on. I was like, dang, y'all teaching me. I just know the basics. Elijah, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if you wanted to add something. Okay,
Sorry.
so very more adaptable, you know, more open to diversity because you guys not only was maybe your environment more diverse, but your social media people, y'all see everything. Y'all on there, y'all see all walks of life. Like I would never do what a lot of young people do on social media. You're like, I would be so afraid. You know, we were taught to be afraid of people we don't know, you know, because if you're not on the block, we don't know you, right? But you guys, y'all are more courageous. You post videos and do all that stuff. I mean, now there's some danger in that, right? Because you want to be careful. But you guys are far more open to people and experiences, you know. So as you can imagine, a lot of times when people talk about, you know, making America great again or stuff like that, you know, culturally anyway, you got to think about how they grew up. Does that make sense? So I give people grace because it has a lot to do with their frame of thinking. Now, there's something I did tell you outside of age. What else do you think crosses our barriers? What else do you think crosses our barriers?
Religion and culture.
Well, that it does in the sense that everybody has one, but those fluctuate. But something else is kind of universal that no matter where you go, if I can pick one out the bunch in Texas, and I can pick one out the bunch in Ethiopia, and it's probably going to be the same. Go ahead, Elijah.
I think style, because I feel like people that was born back then, they don't like. You ever met someone who was born like in the '60s and they still kind of dress like they're in the '60s? They
But
don't really.
I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like that's
No, no, I'm
jazz.
not.
I wasn't born in
I'm
the
just.
60s, but no, it does. At some point it does stop because again, you actually bring up another point, the point I was trying to make about giving people grace. At some point, people stop learning new things. Like me, I'm not on TikTok. I'm not doing TikTok. Listen, I stopped at Instagram. I'm sorry, and I have an IT background. It's too much for me. I don't want to learn nothing
Please get a
else.
TikTok.
No, leave me alone. Listen, and that's when we get older, you just get tired of certain things. You just want to stick to what you know. So probably when it comes to style, that probably is it. But no, here's the thing that remains the same no matter where. Money, your economic status. You can take
We
a
all
rich
are here.
person, you could take a rich person from Florida, and you can take a rich person from the Maldives. You could take a rich person from Ethiopia, and guess what? Rich is rich. You probably go to their house, and they all got the same rich people stuff. You understand my point? You could take someone in middle class, whatever we consider middle class, and I don't care where you pluck them from, they probably all live the same middle class lifestyle. You could take someone that lives in poverty, and I'm talking about real poverty, and I don't care where you pluck them from, they probably all going to have similar experience. They're going to have challenges with the basics: food, shelter, water, whatever. So the two things that never really change is your economic status. A rich person gonna be a rich person, gonna be a rich person. They're gonna have their 15 cars, their 12 houses, whole bunch of money, whatever. A poor person is gonna be a poor person. They're gonna be challenged with the basic needs. Most middle class people are gonna be middle class people. You understand my point? So those two things, money and age, never is universal. It's a universal language. Everything else fluctuates. You know, I'm sure if you walk into a person's home in Australia, you're gonna know right away, okay, this is a rich person's house or this is a poor person's house. You get my point? So those two things kind of never ever change. Everything else fluctuates. So when it comes to things that are similar in how we all see things, that's why economics is so big, I think, in terms of universal, because if even if you see it now, well, heck, you even see it in politics. What's the number one thing President Trump talks about? Money, 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 money. He'll make a deal with anybody when it comes to money because money's universal. But everything else is different. It's multicultural. You're gonna find differences among other things. And it's something that you can either embrace or not embrace. Now, me personally, I've always had an entrepreneurial background. I don't know how you feel about it, but if let's say you owned a grocery store and I owned a grocery store, I want everybody shopping at my grocery store because I want to make as much money as possible. Is there anybody that does not want to make as much money as possible? Right? So if I got to sell, if I have to sell some, some greens from Moldavia, and I'm not even pronouncing that country well because it's like the southernmost tip outside of Africa and Europe. I actually met somebody from there. That's why I always think about it because but I can't remember what this person, how you pronounce their country. Is it Moldavia, whatever it is, right? And that's what's in my neighborhood. Guess what? I'm gonna put me out some greens from Moldavia. Does that make sense? But I'm an entrepreneur. That's how I think, because I want to maximize my profit. So I always choose to embrace diversity. You know, if I had different people on my team, I'll be like, hey, look at here. What you young people like? Because I want to make sure that I have it in my store so I can make me some money. But that's how I think. Now, some people
Hello,
subscribe
fellow
to,
teens.
huh?
No, it's a joke.
Oh, like the young kids had to teach me about, what y'all call that? Is it Taki chips? What's that?
They are
Is it
called
Taki?
Takis, and they are a spicy chip.
Yes. I had no idea what that was. I was like, what is a Taki? And I looked at it and I'm like, is this like a corn chip? Is it like a Dorito, rolled up Dorito? I stopped at Doritos, okay? I don't have time for that. And then it has different colors on it. It's too much for me. But I had to learn. I had to learn. I remember when I was teaching kids at one point, like that's how I rewarded them with Takis because that's what they ate, which to me didn't look like it should be edible, but I guess it is. Um, but I don't care, whatever works, right? And so to me, so I embrace diversity, but I think, and I'm be honest, I'm a business person. I think strictly from a business perspective. So, some people have more of a melting pot where they say, no, we kind of want everybody kind of doing, rock and step, thinking the same, having, because it makes some people comfortable. And I get that, right? I get this idea of, familiarity. Now, people argue that, I guess if you do it too much, it could affect the environment. But you know what I find? I don't know about you guys. No matter what environment I'm in, people tend to do kind of assimilate. Like when I used to live in Africa and I taught in Africa, I taught in Ghana. I taught at the University of Ghana. And I my ex-husband was Ghanaian. Like I met him in Africa. And he came to America for the first time with me. Yes. And let me tell you something. Now he's more American than I am. Like when he first came, he was very Ghanaian, and he had all his traditions. Now he did stick close to, the Ghanaian culture in terms of we lived in Jersey, so you can find, other Ghanaians up there. But if you met him today, you would not know he was from Africa, right? Because he is very Americanized, So I think America it washes over you whether you like it or not, So this idea that, America, is going to get too influenced, I think it's kind of funny because I literally watched someone go from being African to Americans. I was like, oh, okay, you're very American now. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But and that's what tends to happen, right? America has this way of getting into your system. Anybody, I don't know if anybody has experienced that. Maybe you weren't born here, maybe you came here as a teen, and all of a sudden you go back home and they're like, nah, you're an American now. Anybody ever experienced that before or know what I'm talking about? I don't know if that's ever been your experience.
I have seen some people from out of state become American.
How do you become American? It's a funny thing. Go ahead, Francis.
I personally got family from Haiti. And I've seen the transformation, from them growing up in Haiti, coming here, not speaking a lick of English, and now all of
Uh-huh.
a sudden, you wouldn't have an idea they were born out this country.
I to me, I don't know. I find it a beautiful thing because I did grow up back in the day where the principal could go ahead, Ahmed.
See, I'm Palestinian, and I have two different sides to this question actually.
Uh-huh.
The first one is my mom moved here when she was 7 years old from Palestine, and she speaks perfect English. You would never know she wasn't born here, but she speaks Arabic too. But my grandmother, on the other hand, when she moved here, she was like 22, 23, or 20. No, she was like 28. I'm sorry, and she can't speak any. She couldn't speak any English. She couldn't barely any English, very broken English. You could tell she was born in Palestine. So there's two different types of people towards that.
And it depends on when they come too, right? Like you said, your mom came when she was 7, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and your grandma probably came, a bunch later in life.
Near
And
her
like I
near her 30s. So yeah.
yeah, listen, once we get to a certain age, we're not changing. Leave us alone. That's life. You'll understand it when you get older, right? I'm not
What
mad
you
at
using
grandma.
instead of
Grandma like,
TikTok?
look, I've learned enough. I ain't got time for that. It's all good though, right? But but one thing that I do find amazing, this idea, which I wish, people would understand, of course, in my generation, we grew up pledging allegiance to the flag. I don't even know if they still do that anymore in school. We still had, the principal could still paddle you when we were in school. I'm sure they don't do that anymore. But this idea that be all you can be, that was a huge thing, even obviously in the military, be all you can be. Everything was about be all you can be. If America is nothing else, it's be all you can be, right? Which is all about what? Challenging yourself. And that is something that is embedded in every last American, whether you came here yesterday or when you were born here. And I think that's part of what makes you American, this idea that I can be all I want to be and I can dream and I can challenge myself. Do you guys agree with that? And so I said, it's something that gets in your system, honey. Like you ain't, once you in America and you have this thing about being all you can be and challenging yourself to be the best, that's something that you won't find in other places because some other places don't even allow you to dream in that way, right? So that's my 2 cents. But anyway, let's finish up talking about this idea of discipline and termination because nobody likes this topic. So I want to approach it from two perspectives. I want you to think about it in terms of you being the boss, because imagine you having a company and you are competing, right? Remember, if you don't make money, it doesn't make sense. So this idea of termination and discipline, it's a thing because if you don't know how to discipline and correct employees, it's going to affect your bottom line. It's going to affect your bottom line. Now, HR tends to help out with this a lot. And if you've ever been in this situation before, I have, most of us, may go through it once or twice in life. That's just what happens. Nobody's perfect. And not all opportunities are best for you. That's why you got to find the right fit. But a company should have some type of standard way of disciplining and terminating employees. It should look like what you see on the screen. If there's any issues, there's a warning, a verbal warning, then a written warning, then possibly a suspension, even though you don't see that much, and then finally a termination. Suspension, you'll see a lot in government type work. But you want to give people an opportunity to correct their behavior. It costs money to hire people. It costs money to train people. You just don't want to go firing and hiring people all willy-nilly. What companies don't want that. Like you lose what they call institutional knowledge when you go in and out of, hiring and firing people all the time. And if you work at a really good company, they want to kind of follow these steps. It is important for you to know what the discipline process is. It should be in your employee handbook. So when you get that employee handbook and orientation, and they make you sign because they're required to make you sign for it, because guess what? It's part of your employment contract. even though they don't talk to you using that legal language. The reason why they give you an employee handbook is because it's part of your contract. Make sure you go home and read that handbook, okay? Because if they fire you, they're going to go to page 29 or page 37 and say they're firing you based on what was on page 37, but you never read page 37. Go ahead, Josh.
And usually, most companies that I've learned don't do suspension. They just do the 3, but they're usually all the same. And if you don't sign your written warning, you get another written warning for not signing the written warning, which gets you termination for insubordination.
Well, that's why it's important to read their handbook, because it's in the handbook, right? That's why I tell people, I know you hate to think of it like a business contract, and I'm always like, you always got to think about business like business. I think the great Jay-Z said, I'm not a businessman, I'm the businessman. It took me a minute to understand what he was saying, but what he was saying was, and no, I don't listen to Jay-Z. I just had to quote that. I can't, I think I know one Jay-Z song, but anyway, he was saying that he is the business. And guess what? When you're offering your service, you're the business. So you have to treat yourself like one. When you sign that employee contract, that's a contract. You know, you get so happy. Oh, I got me an offer. And you just sign a little offer letter, like thinking like, oh, okay, they're going to do right by me. Listen, that's a contract. So when they give you that employee handbook and you sign off on it, and they do it very nonchalant, you know how they do, because they don't want you to realize that's a contract you're signing. And what you're saying is, I'm going to read the handbook and I'm going to abide by everything in this handbook. I agree with everything in this handbook, because guess what? If something goes wrong, they're going to go right by the handbook to let you go. Now, as he was saying, yeah, the handbook is going to say there's supposed to be a written or a verbal and whatever. Do they all abide by it? No. And this is where you have a legal standing to push back. But if you haven't read the handbook, which they know most of you guys won't, that's why they rush and do all the paperwork to follow the handbook. You don't know what's going on, because if you ever sue them, and even if you live in a state that is Florida, where they say, you can be fired, without cause, there's always exceptions to that rule. If you read the handbook, you would know that. So if you haven't learned anything else I've said, what do you need to do? Make sure you read that handbook, okay? All right, let me get off my soapbox. Y'all know I'm in law school, so I think I'm something. All right, your career. How many hours of an individual's life is spent at work? A lot. Let's just go ahead and put that out there, a lot. You will need to continue your professional development. This is not it. Anybody that thought that, you're trying to hurry up and get on out of here so you can start working, you are going to be learning for the rest of your life. Just go ahead and get used to that and just accept it, especially in today's society where everything is moving so fast. Technology has taken over. You're going to have to continue to learn. You need to learn to continue building your network. Get used to it, right? And really have realistic expectations. And they say respect your money. Now, see, I respect my money because I don't play about my money. I know there's some other people. Put your thumbs up if you don't play about your money. Respect your money, what it can do for you. And, time is money, honey. I don't listen. I'm very friendly, but when it comes to my money, I'll play. That's just who I am. All right. Become a good employee. I say become a good professional. Be professional. Do what you're supposed to do. If someone's paying you for 2 hours, give the people 2 hours, right? You don't do what you're supposed to do, because it will follow you. Your reputation does follow you. The world is much smaller thanks to technology, and you want to be known as that person that gives honest days work for honest days paid. And yes, that's my generation showing itself, because that's how we grew up. Honest days work, honest days paid, you have a good work ethic, but it does follow you. And I think that if you do that, your reputation will precede itself. And for me, it's how you learn as well. and it just makes you a better professional. So that's just my 2 cents. All right. Obviously, common elements of good career. We kind of talked about it. Keep growing, keep learning. That's obvious, right? And then keep improving yourself, keep that self-emotional regulation, understand things about yourself. You'll learn that, once you get involved. I had to learn I don't do well working in teams. I don't play team sports. I don't do anything with teams. I like tennis, I like running, and I like working by myself. It's okay. That's who I am. I had to learn that. So go ahead, Josh. That's why I became a
That's
teacher.
something I covered in that discussion from yesterday. That's something I
Oh,
discussed. I got on somebody's post. I'm sorry, but I was like, character and teamwork are not the most important qualities of the character of a professional, because you can not have good teamwork, but the teamwork, you're still going to get the job done. You can have
well,
bad characteristics,
listen, to
qualities.
me, teamwork could be I do my part. I
Yep.
do my part. So that to me is good teamwork.
And then characteristics of a professional, you can have good qualities and characteristics that would make you a bad professional. There's companies that don't want you to give deals out to employees, will bump you up higher or for customers because you're charging them the most. They'll give you more credit. The company will go up in standing, and they'll be better company and get a higher quota and a higher percentage and be top rating company in this area, but they have no good characteristics of a professional. They'll chip you out of money. They'll find loopholes where they don't have to do stuff.
And you know what I say to that? Now this is where, to me personally, your own personal values, you have to ask yourself, do they conflict with the companies? Because like I said, every company's own, right? And you'll find that a lot in sales jobs. I don't do sales jobs. I can't do it. I can't do it for that very reason. If it's in conflict with who I am, like I can't sell water to a rock. I can't do it. Like if it's something I believe in, I can do it. If it's something I don't believe in, I'm not going to do it because I don't even trust the words coming out of my own mouth. So how can I expect someone else to, and that is where you have to, again, know yourself. Like I said before, know whether I don't do well in team dynamics because, I can't sit around and wait for everybody to get on the same page. That drives me nuts. I don't do well in sales jobs. I'm not selling anything. If I believe in something, I'm going to promote it. That's me, but I have to believe in it. So, I'm one of those type people. I don't even put myself in that position because I will fail. Trust me, I've tried. And I would be the one that would be giving away the coupons, Josh. So they get rid of me quick. But that comes down to, knowing who you are. All right, here's our live session question, our live conference question. I want you to ask yourself, if I find a company in your career field, right? You're going to go and think of, you can Google a company in your career field. Some of you may already know like who you want to work for, right? And then I want you to find a company in your career field that you believe you would like to work for. Like I said, some of you kind of already know, but maybe if you don't, you can go Google it. And then I want you to name 3 things about that company, not a job listing. 3 things about that company. For example, how many employees do they have? What's their company growth? What's their mission statement? This is kind of getting you ready to do that research on that company and say, is this company a good fit for me? Does it make sense with my career plan, right? Am I going to get what I need to get from coming to this company? I said I want to be in my job for 3 years. Is this a company I can stay at for 3 years? And then I want to get promoted. Does this company have upward mobility? That depends on how big is that company. Is it somewhere I can hang my hat for the next 5 years? 3 years in getting to know myself, maybe 2 years in a supervisory role before I start my own business. Think about your career plan. Anytime you think about a job, you should always have your career plan in the back of your head. Does it make sense? Right? So you have to do your research. Do your research. Name 3 things about that company. Don't forget to name the company when you do your live conference, okay? Find a company that you think you want to work for, do some research on that company. Just go to their website, or you can Google them. A lot of companies have themselves in the mail, in the news rather, about how great they are or whatever's happening at their institution. You see it all the time on the news. All right, 3 things about that company and the name of the company. That's your live conference question. I'll keep it up for a sec. I'm going to go ahead also and stop the recording.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand this. What are we supposed to be typing?
Second.